Australia has a problem: feral cats. They have become so abundant that there are calls for culls. But it's not the cats' fault they adapted so well to Australia. They have changed so much in both physical and behavioural characteristics from their domestic counterparts that we asked the question, could the Australian feral cat become a distinct species? Australia has all manner of weird and wonderful wildlife, but the government has recently waged war on one of its species, the feral cat. These cats are not native to the continent and were brought to the country centuries ago. They arrived on ships sailed by European colonists back in the 1700s, possibly earlier, and they made their way into the Australian outback. They were released into a land that was entirely unfamiliar to them, parts of which are some of the most inhospitable on Earth, and yet they survived. Since then, they have driven 27 native animals to extinction, and they threaten 124 more. Every year, these feral cats kill 1.1 billion mammals in Australia. They're considered one of the most dangerous pests the country has known, and now new and inventive ways of catching and disposing of them are being implemented. Despite years of trying to eradicate these pests using cutting-edge technology to detect and capture them without harming any non-target wildlife, it feels like it's a losing battle. The cats are thriving in Australia. The conditions are perfect for them. There are a multitude of habitats in which they can live. They have a huge supply of mammals they can hunt, putting species like the greater bilby, numbat, and Gilbert's potteroo at risk of extinction. But could their success be down to something else? Could they be genetically different from domestic cats? Originally, they were ordinary house cats brought over from Europe. They weren't any different from your regular pet tabby. But they have now been in Australia for so long and are thriving so much that the government has taken action. Could they be evolving into a new species entirely? Could Australia one day add the feral cat to their list of so-called native wildlife? Perhaps Felis australis? The dingo is a classic example of establishing itself in foreign lands. Initially brought over by Asian seafarers around 4,000 years ago, the dingo was native to East Asia. But now that their population has spread through the Australian mainland, they are synonymous with Australia, and many foreigners could be forgiven for thinking that these wild dogs had always been there. And that's not all. There is a fierce debate about whether the dingo is even a dog. It seems to be an intermediary between wolves and domestic dogs. But it has evolved due to Australia's environment and is now quite different from the Asian dog it came from. But one thing has been made clear. The dingo is not recognized scientifically as a subspecies of dog or wolf, and not a unique species in its own right. But what about the cats? The damage Australia's feral cats are causing is concerning. They have changed over the years they have been on Australian soil. Those captured weigh up to an impressive 15 kilograms, 33 pounds. They are now double the nose-to-tail length of domestic cats. They are large enough to take down wallabies and even koalas. They inhabit places where dingoes and foxes haven't spread, becoming the apex predator in that area. But why have they become so large when feral cats in other parts of the world haven't? The answer lies within the niche available to them. The cats in Australia have taken advantage of the prey species on offer. They haven't been limited to small rodents and birds like feral cats in other parts of the world. They can access medium-large-sized marsupials like wallabies, possums, and small kangaroos. These provide the feral cats with nutrient-rich prey. Furthermore, there aren't any large land predators in Australia, so there isn't a selective pressure for the cats to remain small and hidden from potential danger. The feral cats haven't just evolved their physical characteristics, they have also evolved their behavior to suit the environment. So, could these cats become their own species? Perhaps. The evolution of feral cats has been documented elsewhere. The Madagascar forest cat is descended from feral cats, and after thousands of years, they have become part of the landscape on the island nation of Madagascar. They are not considered a unique species, but just like in Australia, they are significantly larger than the domestic cats with their own unique fur patterns. They came to the island from trade ships. Their descendants were from the Arabian Sea region. Today, they are large enough to pose a threat to Madagascar's endangered lemurs. So, although they have different physical and behavioral attributes compared to domestic cats, they are still domestic cats. The same can't be said for the Corsican wildcat, however. This cat was likely introduced to the French island of Corsica by the Romans. There's been debate over the years about whether this cat is in fact its own species. In 2023, genetic analysis found them to be distinctly different from both the European wildcat and the domestic cat, so it seems that they have evolved into their own species. At the moment, just like the dingoes, the Australian feral cat breeds with their domesticated counterparts. Typically, these are farm cats that live in more rural locations. But if the feral cats become so large that this breeding stopped, and they began to see the domestic cats as prey and not mates, then the smaller genes from the domestic cats would be whittled out of the gene pool, and the cats would only grow larger still. There are many definitions of distinct species. Most common is the inability to interbreed with the other animal. Genetically, it is generally accepted that organisms need to have at least a 2% difference in their DNA for them to be considered separate species. Everyone thinks that evolution is an incredibly slow process, and in some respects, it is. But with every single generation, there are new combinations of genes and mutations that may or may not improve the genetic fitness or survival capabilities of an individual animal. A larger cat means it can eat larger prey, fend off larger predators, and maintain a larger territory. So with each new generation, there comes the possibility of an animal surviving better in the environment, and therefore passing its genes onto the next generation. There are many examples of animal species that have evolved in several years or less, rather than the thousands of years that Darwin once suggested. One example includes the green anole lizards in Florida, which developed larger toe pads and more scales, allowing them to cling to higher branches to avoid competition with the invading brown anole lizards. This transformation happened in just 15 years, or around 20 generations. Another example of rapid evolution includes an experiment with guppies that researcher David Resnick set up in 1981. He added predatory cichlid fish to a guppy site in a stream that was previously predator-free. In just 4 years, or 6 to 8 guppy generations, the guppies had evolved in response to the presence of predators. They became smaller, matured earlier, and produced more babies. Now with the changing climate, we are seeing more animals adapting to the changing conditions. Salmon are migrating from the sea to the rivers earlier. This isn't just a behavioral change, it is a genetic one. The pressures of climate change are selecting fish that migrate a couple of weeks earlier. Less snow during Finland's winters has caused their tawny owls to change their plumage to more brown colours rather than white to blend in with the snowless background. In the case of the feral cats in Australia, it also looks like the evolution is happening right before our eyes. We can physically see that the cats are bigger than the domesticated cats. This has only taken a few hundred years. Where will the Australian feral cat be in the next few hundred years? Yes, these cats may not belong in Australia, and they join the list of other invasive species, like the dingo, camel, and cane toad. But given enough time, they could be seen as part of the Australian wildlife. Unless, of course, the government eradicates them first. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment with what you would like to see in the following videos. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.